Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot onto the hot sand of West Africa, around the year 1280. The horizon is wide and flat, the air is thick with the smell of smoke from evening fires, and the Niger River glitters lazily under the fading sun. You're here to meet a boy who will one day be known as Mansa Musa, perhaps the richest man to ever walk the earth. But right now, he's just a child in the Mali Empire, tugging on the edge of his mother's cloak and sneaking dates from a basket when no one's looking. You probably won't survive the heat, the dust, and the mosquitoes of this world, but don't worry. I'll let you ride in the shade while Musa does the sweating. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a bustling village on the edge of the Sahel. The huts are round, built from mud and straw, and goats bleat with the persistence of unpaid interns. Musa's father is a minor noble, close enough to power to hear the palace gossip, far enough to avoid being poisoned by it. The young boy grows up in an atmosphere thick with stories. Griots chant genealogies stretching back to the empire's founding, and traveling merchants tell half-true tales of lands so distant they might as well be dreams. The Mali Empire in Musa's childhood is a place of astonishing wealth. Gold dust isn't just currency, it's sprinkled on clothing like glitter at a craft store. Salt, so ordinary to you, is hauled across the desert in great slabs and treated like treasure. Historians still argue whether Musa was born directly into royal blood, or simply into a family that happened to be close enough to the throne to smell its cushions. Either way, his boyhood is wrapped in privilege and expectation. Picture him as a curious child, following older cousins into the marketplace of Niani, the capital city. Traders from across Africa and beyond are there. Berbers in flowing robes, desert Tuareg with faces half hidden by indigo veils, and even merchants from as far as Cairo or Morocco. They exchange fabrics, ivory, kola nuts, and of course gold. Musa listens, wide-eyed, to languages he doesn't understand, and he smells the sharp tang of spices that make his nose twitch. At night, when the air cools, he lies under the stars and hears his grandmother's voice weaving fables about trickster hares and stubborn crocodiles. Mainstream fact: Musa grows up during a time when Mali is already one of the largest and wealthiest empires in the world, controlling trade routes that stretch like veins across the Sahara. Quirky tidbit: local tradition sometimes involved applying crocodile dung as a sort of sunscreen. Practical in its way, though you're probably glad your SPF 50 comes in a plastic tube. And young Musa is learning not just about survival, but about faith. Islam has taken root here, brought by traders and scholars, but it mingles with older local beliefs, like tea leaves swirling in hot water. Children recite verses from the Quran, but they also hear tales of forest spirits and ancestral guardians. Musa's world is a tapestry woven from many threads, and as you wander through his boyhood, you notice how naturally he accepts contradictions. He studies with teachers in open-air courtyards, scratching Arabic letters into wooden tablets. He listens to the griots, whose voices rise and fall like waves, and he begins to realize that knowledge, whether whispered, sung, or written, is a kind of wealth even greater than gold. Imagine Musa sitting by a flickering oil lamp, hearing about empires that rose and fell before his. The Ghana Empire, the empire of his people's ancestors, was once the great power in this region, and its decline is a warning. Wealth can fade, and kings can crumble. His young mind soaks it all in, while you yawn comfortably in your blanket, not worrying about being drafted into desert politics. Historians still argue whether Musa's exact birth year was closer to 1280 or 1285. But the point is this: by the time you've stretched and rolled onto your side, he's already being groomed for a life larger than most can imagine. Even so, he's still a child who sneaks mangoes when no one is looking and laughs when his cousin's goat eats the laundry. His youth is also marked by sound: the metallic clang of blacksmiths hammering iron tools, the hum of prayers drifting from small clay mosques, and the rhythmic clapping of women pounding millet into flour. These everyday noises become the soundtrack to Musa's early years, shaping a memory that will never leave him. As the empire grows, Musa absorbs its lessons like sand soaking up water. You feel the weight of the world forming around him, though he cannot yet know that one day his name will be written across maps in Europe, Asia, and beyond. For now, he's simply a boy of Mali, learning to balance on the knife's edge between tradition and ambition, laughter and responsibility. And you, rocking gently in your chair or sinking deeper into your pillow, realize that you've only just begun walking the golden road of Mansa Musa's story. You wake to the sound of hooves on packed earth, the kind of steady rhythm that announces someone important is passing by. Musa, now older, no longer just a child sneaking fruit. He's a young man beginning to feel the gravitational pull of the royal court. The Mali Empire is not a playground anymore. It is a vast organism, stretching across savanna, desert, and forest, and he is slowly learning where he fits inside its ribcage. He doesn't yet wear a crown, of course. Instead, he's dressed in layered cotton robes dyed deep with local plants, and he watches the nobles move through the halls of Niani's palace. The air smells of incense and sweat, a strange mixture that suggests both sanctity and politics. And Musa, attentive as always, realizes that power doesn't shout. It whispers, and you have to lean in to hear it. Mainstream fact? The empire is ruled at this time by Abu Bakr II, a ruler whose fascination with exploration and seafaring will later change Musa's trajectory. Under Abu Bakr, young men of noble families are often drawn into administrative or military roles, expected to prove their worth. Musa, with his education in both Islamic scholarship and local tradition, is a natural fit for the machinery of governance. Quirky tidbit: part of royal training sometimes involved sitting through marathon sessions of oral recitation. Lineages, treaties, and even tax rolls recited by griots until dawn. Imagine your worst college lecture, multiply it by 10 hours, and then remember that Musa had to keep a straight face the entire time. You, meanwhile, would probably fake a coughing fit just to escape. Musa's rise through the ranks is quiet but steady. He learns to manage disputes between villages, arguments over water rights, grazing lands, or whether someone's goat ate someone else's millet again. He becomes known for his calm voice, a kind of verbal lullaby that diffuses tension. When others are eager to swing swords, Musa suggests weighing the scales of justice instead. Historians still argue whether his early roles were more military or administrative, but everyone agrees he was seen as dependable. Dependability, it turns out, is the secret handshake of power. You imagine Musa sitting in council chambers, watching the older nobles debate, their voices sharp, their eyes measuring one another. He doesn't interrupt much. Instead, he waits, and when he does speak, people listen. It's not charisma in the flashy, trumpet-blaring sense. It's charisma like a deep well, something you lean over because you sense its depth. As the years drift on, Musa becomes a deputy of sorts, sometimes acting as second in command when the ruler is away. It's a role that requires patience, discretion, and occasionally the ability to nod sagely while not actually agreeing with anyone. You might recognize this as the ancient version of sitting through an office meeting where everyone thinks their idea is brilliant. Walking through the royal compound with Musa, you hear the rustle of palm fronds, the murmur of clerks scratching tallies onto wooden boards, and the occasional thump of drums carrying messages across the city. You smell roasted goat, spiced couscous, and the faint metallic tang of coins freshly minted from the empire's gold. Musa develops a knack for diplomacy, smoothing over tensions with neighboring kingdoms and welcoming traders with gracious words. It's not glamorous work, but it builds him a reputation for steadiness, like a rock in the river that the water must flow around. Slowly, inexorably, he becomes the man everyone knows can handle responsibility without letting it leak through his fingers. And here's the scholarly debate that drifts into your ears like the buzz of a mosquito at dusk. Some accounts claim Musa was appointed as deputy ruler directly by Abu Bakr II before the latter's great expedition across the Atlantic. Others suggest Musa was elevated only after Abu Bakr set sail and failed to return. Either way, what matters is that Musa is now positioned closer to the throne than ever before, without really reaching for it. Fate, as you'll see, is doing the heavy lifting. At night, Musa sits under the stars, the constellations mirrored in the Niger River, and wonders what path his life will take. He hears griots reciting epics of past kings and silently measures his own footsteps against those giants. He's not yet the golden monarch who will scatter wealth across continents. He's simply a young man trusted by his ruler, respected by his peers. And though he may not realize it, steadily being placed in line for destiny's handoff. You lean back, eyelids heavy, hearing the echoes of a court where ambition and caution dance together like candle flames in the breeze. And you sense, even before Musa does, that the crown is inching toward him with each quiet, dependable act. The sun is glaring, the air feels heavy with possibility, and you're suddenly aware that the wheel of fortune has spun. Musa is about to become emperor, not through ambition, but through accident. One morning, as the court prepares for routine business, whispers begin to ripple like a breeze through tall grass. The Mansa, Abu Bakr II, has decided to chase the horizon. Literally, he wants to find what lies beyond the Atlantic Ocean. Mainstream fact? Historical chronicles describe Abu Bakr II as sending fleets of ships westward, convinced that a world awaited on the other side of the water. Some accounts even say he went personally, leaving Musa as his deputy. Quirky tidbit? The sailors on those expeditions reportedly carried gourds filled with millet porridge, dried dates, and even live chickens for the journey. Imagine seasickness and a rooster crowing at dawn on a tiny boat. Definitely not the cruise package you booked. Historians still argue whether Abu Bakr's expedition was a single bold voyage or several smaller ones. They debate whether it ever truly happened or was exaggerated later by storytellers. But in your ears, the story feels real enough. An emperor's obsession dragging him into the open sea, never to return, leaving a vacuum that destiny rushes to fill. So Musa, still a relatively young man, finds himself stepping into shoes he didn't polish. As deputy, he's suddenly elevated to ruler, the crown not placed delicately on his head, but practically dropped onto it by circumstance. You watch him sit down in the grand hall of Niani, the carved wooden throne cool beneath him, as nobles and advisors bow. Some bow reluctantly, some with relief. Musa himself exhales, perhaps realizing the air now smells different. He's breathing power, and power breathes back. The empire is vast. Its rivers snake through fertile lands, its caravans crawl across desert sand like ants carrying wealth, and its borders stretch farther than Musa can ride in a month. You see him tracing his finger along maps painted on hides, names of cities and trade posts inked like constellations across the surface. Each dot represents responsibility, each line a potential fracture if ignored. And here you are, trailing behind him like a sleepy advisor, noticing the practicalities he must suddenly master. Tribute payments must flow from vassal states. Trade agreements must be honored. The army, though largely quiet, must stay loyal. Musa is no longer the steady deputy. He is now the axle upon which this enormous wheel spins. There's a kind of irony in how quietly it happens. No trumpets, no coronation feast with roasted elephants, though that would have been dramatic. Just a handover wrapped in uncertainty, the empire watching carefully to see if Musa can carry the load. In those first weeks, Musa takes cautious steps. He doesn't announce sweeping reforms or grand visions. Instead, he walks through the palace gardens, confers with senior nobles, and listens more than he speaks. You imagine him sipping water from a carved gourd, pausing to stroke his beard thoughtfully, while courtiers chatter around him. It's like the world's slowest group project. Everyone waiting to see if the new leader will actually open the document and start typing. But Musa has something rare: patience. He doesn't rush to prove himself. He trusts time to do the talking. And in the meantime, he leans on his knowledge of faith, law, and culture to project calm authority. His background as a steady, dependable figure becomes his greatest asset now that eyes are glued to him. At night, the griots sing differently. Their songs, once about noble ancestors and distant empires, now weave Musa's name into the verses. You hear it carried on the wind, echoing across the courtyards, slipping into children's bedtime chants. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Musa transforms from man to monarch, from deputy to destiny. Imagine the surreal feeling. One day you're managing disputes over grazing land, and the next you're the richest ruler in Africa. Musa doesn't strut though. He carries himself like someone who knows the gold dust might slip between his fingers if he squeezes too tightly. And so, as the torches burn low and the palace falls into silence, you realize Musa's reign has begun, not with thunder or lightning, but with a quiet handover, a vanished emperor, and a man who never sought power but now embodies it. You find yourself walking alongside Musa in the first hesitant months of his reign. The palace is still the same. the carved beams, the echoing courtyards. But the air feels thicker, charged with expectation. Musa is emperor now, and everyone, from the lowest porter to the highest noble, is watching to see if he can actually rule. Mainstream fact. Musa begins his reign around 1312, stepping into an empire already sprawling across much of West Africa. It includes gold mines, trade routes, and cities buzzing with scholars and merchants. But inheriting such a kingdom isn't as easy as polishing a crown. Musa has to make choices that could either hold this vast territory together or let it slip apart like sand through his fingers. He starts small. Rather than launching wars or demanding new taxes, Musa focuses on stability. He confirms local leaders in their posts, making sure the tributary states feel secure. You watch him nod politely through endless meetings, each chieftain rattling off concerns. One complains about caravans skirting their markets, another about bandits raiding a stretch of road. Musa listens carefully, the way you pretend to listen, on Zoom calls, except he actually remembers details, filing them away like coins in a pouch. Quirky tidbit. Some early court documents suggest disputes could be settled by simply swearing oaths while touching a lump of sacred earth. Imagine your local courthouse being replaced by a clump of dirt on a pedestal. Efficient, if not very glamorous. Musa doesn't dismiss these traditions. Instead, he respects them, blending Islamic law with local customs in a way that keeps everyone calm. Historians still argue whether Musa was immediately ambitious, already plotting his famous pilgrimage, or whether he genuinely intended only modest reforms at first. What seems clear is that he builds trust by acting cautiously, almost like a shepherd, guiding restless goats one by one back into the pen. You follow Musa as he tours the capital, Niani. The streets smell of roasted peanuts and grilled fish, smoke from clay hearths curling into the hot sky. Children run barefoot across dusty lanes, chasing each other with the shrieks of boundless energy. Musa pauses at the mosque, bowing his head in prayer, his figure framed against the baked mud walls. He's showing the people that faith will guide his rule, that order will not vanish just because Abu Bakr did. His reforms are quiet but important. He introduces clearer trade rules, ensuring that caravans moving across Mali pay fair tolls without being bled dry by greedy officials. He tweaks agricultural policies, encouraging irrigation along the Niger to prevent famine. He strengthens the justice system, so disputes don't spiral into blood feuds. Nothing flashy, but like adjusting the strings of a kora, these changes bring harmony to a kingdom that could easily slip into discord. Meanwhile, Musa begins to cultivate a circle of advisors, men of learning, scribes, jurists. They pore over parchment and recite law under the shade of mango trees. The sound of ink scratching and pens tapping becomes the new rhythm of governance. You notice Musa's style. He listens, he asks, and then he decides, not rashly, but with the confidence of someone who knows time is on his side. One evening, you walk with him through the palace gardens. Lanterns glow faintly, fireflies dart between leaves, and the scent of hibiscus lingers in the warm air. Musa leans against a carved bench, speaking softly to a scholar about the balance between earthly wealth and divine duty. You realize this balance will define his reign, a ruler who has more gold than anyone else, yet insists that faith and justice matter just as much. And then, the whispers start. Merchants bring stories of distant lands, of Cairo's libraries, Mecca's holy shrines, Baghdad's great scholars. Musa listens, intrigued, and you can almost see the seeds of a pilgrimage stirring in his mind. Not yet, though. For now, he focuses on building stability, laying the foundation on which something magnificent can later rise. At night, as the city sleeps, griots compose new verses. They sing of Musa the just, Musa the patient, Musa who holds the empire steady like a pot balanced on 3 stones. The fires flicker low, drums fade, and in the calm silence, you sense the weight of early power pressing down on him. And yet somehow, he bears it without flinching. You rise with the dawn, the sky glowing pink over the Niger River, and find yourself surrounded by the hum of markets already waking. This is the Mali Empire's heartbeat, trade. Musa, now secure in his throne, understands that wealth isn't just measured by what you hoard. It's measured by how steadily the veins of commerce flow through your land. And those veins are golden, literally. Mainstream fact? The Empire of Mali sat on some of the richest gold mines in the known world, especially in Bambouk and Bora. Combined with control of the salt routes across the Sahara, this made Musa's kingdom the glittering center of global trade. Gold flowed north to North Africa and Europe. Salt flowed south, sustaining villages where heat made preservation essential. Imagine living in a time when salt was treated like Bitcoin, volatile in price, occasionally scarce, and always worth arguing over at dinner. Quirky tidbit. Traders sometimes used hollowed ostrich eggs to carry gold dust, sealed with wax. Practical, sure, but you better hope no one accidentally sat on one during the journey. Somewhere out there, an unlucky camel driver probably discovered scrambled eggs with a very expensive surprise. You walk with Musa through a bustling caravanserai, where camels kneel to unload bales of cloth, copper ingots, sacks of kola nuts, and jars of honey. The air is thick with smells: sweet dates, pungent leather, and the salty tang of sweat. Musa's officials carefully weigh and tax goods, ensuring that every slab of salt and every pouch of gold dust contributes to the empire's coffers. Historians still argue whether Mali's gold output single-handedly disrupted Mediterranean economies. But there's no doubt that Musa's control of these mines and routes gave him unprecedented leverage. When European mapmakers later drew Africa, they often placed a little crowned figure, Mansa Musa himself, holding a golden nugget the size of a grapefruit. That wasn't artistic exaggeration. It was recognition of his empire's sheer economic gravity. But you don't just see trade, you feel it. The steady plod of camel hooves, the jangle of copper bracelets traded for ivory, the murmur of negotiations in multiple languages, Arabic, Songhai, Fulani, Berber, all blurring into a low, soothing chorus. Musa doesn't just preside from afar. He strolls the markets, listening to complaints, nodding at merchants, occasionally laughing at a joke about how camels always smell like wet blankets. You notice how deliberate he is in shaping trade laws. Musa ensures that no single group monopolizes routes, spreading wealth while keeping the empire's core strong. He invests in safe caravan stations, little islands of security across the desert where traders can rest without losing everything to bandits. You might call them the ancient equivalent of highway rest stops, though instead of gas station hot dogs, they offer dates, water, and maybe a fresh turban. And Musa doesn't forget the symbolic side of wealth. When foreign envoys arrive, he stages receptions where gold dust sparkles in bowls, musicians strum choras, and courtiers wear robes dyed in imported indigo. The message is clear. Mali isn't just rich, it's refined. It's a place where trade isn't mere survival, but an art form. One evening, you follow Musa into the treasury. The chamber glows with flickering torches, shadows dancing across stacks of gold bars and heaps of dust stored in leather bags. Musa pauses, silent, his hand resting lightly on a pouch. He knows this wealth is both blessing and burden. Too much generosity could devalue it. Too much hoarding could breed resentment. He carries the responsibility of balancing prosperity like a tightrope walker crossing a canyon. Yet, despite the vastness of his fortune, Musa isn't portrayed as greedy. Instead, he seems amused by gold's power, aware of its fragility. You imagine him joking with advisors. It shines beautifully, but you can't eat it for dinner. The griots, of course, spin these images into song. They describe rivers of gold running through the empire, salt slabs piled higher than houses, and Musa standing calmly at the crossroads of plenty. The songs are exaggerated, but not by much. After all, when foreign travelers arrived, they often left with their jaws still hanging open at the spectacle. As night settles, the trade routes quiet. Camels kneel in the sand. Fires flicker at way stations, and the desert stars blink like scattered coins. Musa gazes toward the north, where caravans will carry his empire's wealth across the Sahara. You, drowsy from the long walk, realize that gold and salt aren't just commodities here. They are the twin pillars holding up Musa's empire, glowing faintly under the endless sky. By now, Musa's empire is more than a map of rivers and mines. It's a web of voices, stories, and wisdom. And nothing carries those threads more beautifully than education. If gold made Mali shine, then knowledge gave it depth. You find yourself standing before the great city of Timbuktu, its skyline dotted with mud brick minarets that rise like earthen fingers against the desert sky. The streets are alive with scholars, scribes, merchants, and curious students. To a modern traveller, Timbuktu has become shorthand for the ends of the earth. But here in Musa's day, it's the beating heart of learning. Mainstream fact? Musa's reign saw the flowering of Timbuktu as a centre of Islamic scholarship, especially at the Sankore University. At its peak, this institution held tens of thousands of manuscripts, covering theology, astronomy, medicine, law, and poetry. Imagine a desert city functioning as a vast library, where sandstorms might batter the doors, but inside, ideas swirled even more powerfully. Quirky tidbit: some manuscripts survive today with doodles in the margins, notes on camel prices, shopping lists, even little jokes. One scholar, mid-sermon on divine law, apparently scribbled something resembling, "Don't forget milk." Proof that even geniuses had groceries on their minds. As you follow Musa through Sankor's courtyard, the scene feels oddly modern. Students huddle in clusters, debating fiercely under the shade of acacia trees. Professors, robed in white, with voices booming or whispering, dictate lessons that their apprentices eagerly transcribe. You catch fragments in Arabic, Songhai, and Fulani, each syllable weaving Mali tighter into the global web of Islamic scholarship. Musa doesn't simply fund these centres, he infuses them with purpose. After his famous pilgrimage, he invited architects and scholars from Cairo and beyond. One such architect, Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, helped design mosques that fused North African styles with local Sahelian forms, structures that still inspire awe centuries later. Thick adobe walls kept the heat out, while wooden beams projected like ribs, both decorative and practical, offering footholds for annual replastering. You lean back against a wall, letting the hum of recitation wash over you. It's hypnotic. Verses of the Quran, legal arguments, and poetic riddles blending into a rhythm that feels like music for the mind. For a moment, it doesn't matter whether you understand every word. The sound alone lulls you into calm, as though the city itself is whispering, "Learn, learn, learn." Historians often point out that Musa's investment in education wasn't just pious, it was political. A literate bureaucracy, guided by Islamic law, meant smoother governance. Knowledge was infrastructure as much as roads or wells. And in a region where oral tradition reigned supreme, writing became both an anchor and a ladder, securing Mali's legacy while raising it toward global recognition. But there's warmth here too. In the evening, when the sun cools and shadows stretch long, griots gather outside the mosques. Their songs don't compete with the scholars' texts. Instead, they complement them. A griot might recite a lineage in song while a scribe carefully pens it down, ensuring that memory and ink walk side by side. One night, Musa joins a circle of students beneath an oil lamp. He asks them what they've learned, listens patiently to their recitations, then surprises them with questions. His laughter, when a nervous boy misquotes a line, is gentle, not mocking. To be in his presence isn't to fear the weight of an emperor's crown. It's to feel that wealth and wisdom can coexist without crushing one another. You wander further, into a scriptorium where manuscripts dry on wooden racks. The scent of ink and parchment fills the air, sharper than any spice in the markets. A scribe explains to you how camel skin can be stretched into pages, how imported paper from North Africa is prized, and how every line copied is a bridge to eternity. Gold shines, he says softly, but words last, and perhaps that's Musa's quietest legacy. Not the coins he scattered, nor the caravans that groaned under salt, but the words inked in the desert. Words that centuries later still rest in dusty chests and hidden libraries, waiting for someone to stumble upon them and be astonished all over again. As you step out into the night, Timbuktu hums like a hive, students chanting under lanterns, scribes bending over pages, griots weaving melody into memory. Above, the stars seem brighter here, as though even the heavens lean closer, eager to listen. And as the cool desert wind brushes your face, you feel it. Knowledge itself is the empire's truest treasure, more enduring than gold, more nourishing than salt. Musa's empire doesn't exist in a vacuum. Gold glitters brightest when others can see it, and Mali's reputation spreads far beyond the Niger River. You trace your steps alongside merchants, envoys, and wide-eyed travelers as stories of Musa ripple outward, reshaping how the wider world imagines Africa. The mainstream fact is this: Musa's 1324 pilgrimage to Mecca wasn't just a religious duty, it was a full-scale PR event. Tens of thousands of attendants, lavishly dressed, marched across the Sahara with camels burdened by gold. In Cairo, his generosity supposedly disrupted the economy for over a decade, flooding the market with so much bullion that prices collapsed. That's one way to announce, "Hi, we're Mali, and yes, we're loaded." And the quirky tidbit: some chroniclers claim Musa's caravan included not just guards, slaves, and officials, but also singers, dancers, and even portable gardens to keep the vibe lush. Imagine an emperor dragging a mini park across the Sahara because desert aesthetics just weren't cutting it. Diplomats from Europe begin whispering about him too. Catalan mapmakers in the 1375 Atlas depict Musa holding a golden orb, larger than life, perched regally on Africa's map. To the medieval European mind, he was almost mythical, a king of boundless riches, ruling a land that seemed to drip with treasure. You can picture the gossip in Venetian taverns. Ever heard of the king so rich he broke Cairo? That's how rumors travel, over cups of wine, through sailors' tales, slipping into cartographers' hands. Historians still argue whether these depictions exaggerated Musa's wealth or simply reflected foreign awe. Did he really hand out gold to beggars by the handful, or were observers so dazzled that memory inflated into legend? Either way, perception became reality. Mali was stamped into global consciousness as a land of endless riches, and Musa as the man who personified it. You stroll through the markets of Cairo in your imagination, where merchants once haggled furiously. One swears Musa gave him enough gold to retire. Another grumbles that inflation doubled the price of bread. Somewhere in the middle lies the truth. Wealth, after all, is never just about numbers. It's about who controls the story. Musa understands this instinctively. He sends emissaries not only to Islamic courts, but also to neighboring kingdoms. Traders from Genoa and Granada, Morocco and Egypt leave Mali carrying not just salt and gold, but tales of grandeur. Mali becomes less of a name on a parchment and more of a shimmering legend in people's minds. At home, the ripple effects are visible too. Foreign scholars and artisans arrive, lured by patronage and prestige. Arabic calligraphy adorns Timbuktu's manuscripts. Geometric North African patterns embellish Mali's mosques. Ideas cross deserts like caravans do, carrying seeds of style, faith, and science. You notice how the empire's architecture begins to merge local traditions with imported flourishes, proof that borders blur under the weight of exchange. And yet, the irony isn't lost on you. Musa never set out to destabilize Cairo's economy, nor to become a medieval meme of wealth. He simply traveled as faith demanded, perhaps too generously, perhaps too dramatically. Sometimes reputations grow, not because you polish them carefully, but because the world can't stop staring. As you wander back through Timbuktu's gates in your mind, you can almost hear envoys reporting back to faraway kings. There is a land where gold is like dust, and its ruler prays 5 times a day, yet gives as if his hands were bottomless. Whether accurate or embroidered, those reports ensured that Mali was never forgotten in the wider tapestry of world history. Gold fades, caravans pass, but stories? Stories stick. And Musa, knowingly or not, became the story every trader, diplomat, and scholar wanted to tell. You've stood in Timbuktu's libraries, browsed its markets, and admired Musa's court, but now you face the desert itself, the great rolling Sahara. Picture yourself at the edge of endless dunes, where the wind carves ripples into the sand as though the earth itself is whispering. Musa prepares his pilgrimage caravan, and you, lucky dreamwalker, are right there beside him. The mainstream fact is straightforward. Musa's caravan is said to have included tens of thousands of people, hundreds of camels, and staggering amounts of gold. Chroniclers describe 80 camels each carrying hundreds of pounds of the precious metal. This wasn't a small road trip. It was a mobile empire trudging across the sand, shimmering under the African sun. The quirky tidbit. Some travelers claimed that Musa's entourage even hauled entire cooking setups with them, complete with fine silver serving dishes. Imagine trudging through dunes only to sit down to a 3-course dinner, candlelight glinting off imported cutlery. That's commitment to luxury, or maybe just the medieval version of glamping. The Sahara, though, is no joke. You can almost feel the sun baking your shoulders. the sand searing your feet through thin sandals. Camels grunt, bells jingle softly, and dust swirls into your mouth with every breath. Yet the caravan moves steadily, guided by desert law. Local Tuareg nomads lend their expertise, pointing toward hidden wells and oases. You sense their quiet authority. Without them, even kings would be hopelessly lost. Historians still argue whether the numbers were exaggerated. Did Musa truly travel with tens of thousands? Or did chroniclers inflate the headcount to dramatize the story? Even if the figures are half right, the sight must have been breathtaking. A slow-moving sea of humans and animals, shimmering under moonlight. An empire on the move. The desert's dangers lurk everywhere. Sandstorms rise suddenly, blotting out the horizon. Travelers whisper of jinn, spirits said to roam the dunes, who lure wanderers off course. You imagine huddling at night around a fire, the sky stretched vast and cold above you, while someone mutters about a cousin who vanished into a sandstorm chasing phantom lights. Superstition feels at home here, and yet, within the hardship, there's rhythm. By day, the caravan marches. By night, it rests at scattered oases. Palms bend gently, water reflects starlight, and for a brief moment, you forget the harshness around you. Musa likely used these pauses for prayer and counsel, grounding himself in faith as well as logistics. For him, this wasn't just spectacle. It was a sacred journey, one where every step drew him closer to Mecca. You find yourself pacing with the camels, lulled by their awkward sway. The jingling bells become a sleepy metronome. Somewhere behind you, musicians pluck strings and beat drums, carrying melodies into the dry night. It's absurd and beautiful, a caravan that is part royal procession, part traveling village, part endurance test. Gold glints even here. When the caravan distributes alms along the way, locals at desert towns gape at the generosity. Stories spread faster than the camels can walk. By the time Musa even reaches Cairo, rumors of an emperor showering gold in the sand are already buzzing like flies at a desert market. You look up. The stars are sharp as diamonds, and the Milky Way stretches like spilled flour across the dark. The desert is silence and sound, hardship and comfort, the perfect contradiction. Walking there with Musa, you realize why later generations remembered this pilgrimage less as logistics and more as legend. It wasn't just the wealth, it was the audacity of carrying an empire through the emptiest place on earth. And through it all, Musa trudges forward steadily, a ruler cloaked in humility and grandeur all at once, guided by faith, surrounded by noise, but somehow alone in his quiet resolve. The desert heat fades from your imagination as the caravan edges closer to civilization. After weeks of endless sand and weary camels, you arrive with Musa at the gates of Cairo. Picture the scene, a medieval city buzzing with markets, crowded with merchants from across the Mediterranean. The Nile shimmering like a ribbon of life, and into this vibrant chaos strolls Musa's glittering procession, a sight so extravagant it leaves Egyptians blinking in disbelief. The mainstream fact is clear. Musa's arrival in Cairo in 1324 was one of the most spectacular events the city ever witnessed. Chroniclers describe how he distributed so much gold that the local currency's value plummeted for years afterward. It's the only time in recorded history when one man's generosity single-handedly destabilized a major economy. Imagine being the unlucky baker whose bread suddenly cost triple just because a West African king decided to tip lavishly. The quirky tidbit. Accounts suggest Musa was so humble, or perhaps so focused on faith, that he initially tried to avoid meeting the Mamluk Sultan. He considered himself a pilgrim, not a visiting head of state. But the Sultan insisted. When Musa finally appeared in court, he performed an elaborate bow that some say included face planting into the floor. Others claimed he resisted until aides gently nudged him downward. Either way, that's one awkward icebreaker for international diplomacy. Historians still argue whether the inflationary impact of Musa's gold lasted a decade or more. Was Cairo's market truly crippled, or did later writers exaggerate the drama to highlight the king's wealth? Regardless, you can imagine local merchants gossiping. First he gave me a purse of coins, then I couldn't buy onions without paying double. It's the kind of economic roller coaster that makes legends stick. You walk with Musa through Cairo's bustling streets. Spice stalls perfume the air with cinnamon and pepper. Water carriers shout, donkeys bray, and the crowd parts reluctantly to let the caravan pass. Camels draped in embroidered cloth sway slowly forward, while guards in gleaming gear keep a steady pace. Children gape, reaching out to touch the silks, while gold coins scatter like autumn leaves into outstretched hands. And Musa himself, he prays in Cairo's mosques, consults with scholars, and exchanges gifts with the Sultan. Between prayers, he quietly funds endowments for religious schools, ensuring his generosity lingers long after his caravan departs. You sense his dual purpose, part spiritual devotion, part soft power diplomacy. He isn't simply showing off, he's weaving Mali into the fabric of the wider Islamic world. At night, Cairo glows with torchlight. Musicians strum lutes, storytellers recite epics, and Musa's attendants mingle with locals, trading tales and recipes. Somewhere, a weary merchant counts his inflated profits, muttering curses at the foreign king who turned gold from blessing into headache. Yet even he can't deny the magnificence of what he's seen. When Musa finally leaves Cairo, he leaves behind not only deflated markets but also an enduring memory of a king so rich his generosity broke economies, and so devout he insisted on humility, even when ruling half of West Africa. For you, drifting in the narrative, Cairo becomes a dreamscape, crowded, noisy, golden. And just as quickly as it appeared, the city fades into the distance as Musa continues toward the Holy Lands. The Nile fades behind you, and soon the caravan enters the holiest of destinations. You step with Musa into the sacred heart of Islam, Mecca and Medina, where the dusty clamor of the road gives way to solemn ritual. Picture the pilgrims, thousands strong, circling the Kaaba in unified rhythm, voices rising in prayer. Musa, with his immense entourage, blends into the ocean of humanity, his crown metaphorically set aside before the Creator. The mainstream fact is that Musa completed the Hajj, fulfilling the fifth pillar of Islam. For all the glitter of gold and grandeur of his caravan, this was the core of his mission, to demonstrate devotion. Chroniclers describe how he prayed, fasted, and carried himself with the humility expected of a pilgrim. However grand the procession, once within the sacred precincts, he was just another servant of God, the quirky tidbit. Some reports claim Musa was so generous in Mecca that he financed water distribution for other pilgrims. Imagine trudging across scorching stone courtyards only to find fresh water courtesy of a king from far-off Mali. It's like the medieval version of sponsoring free Wi-Fi at an airport. Everyone suddenly loves you. Historians still argue whether Musa's gifts in the holy cities were primarily acts of faith or calculated diplomacy. Was he simply fulfilling zakat, the obligation to give alms, or deliberately building Mali's reputation as a pious, wealthy empire? Maybe it was both. Faith and politics often walk hand in hand, and Musa seemed comfortable holding both reins at once. You drift alongside him through Medina, where he offers prayers at the Prophet's mosque. The air smells faintly of incense, voices murmur in countless dialects, and pilgrims shuffle shoulder to shoulder, all distinctions softened in devotion. Musa listens to scholars, debates theology, and perhaps even marvels at being part of a global fellowship that stretches from West Africa to Central Asia. At night, the city hums quietly. Lanterns sway above narrow alleys, shadows stretch long across stone walls, and pilgrims rest on mats under open skies. Musa lies awake under the same stars you see in your imagination, his mind no doubt balancing faith with duty. For a moment, he isn't an emperor, or the richest man alive. He's a pilgrim with sore feet, grateful for rest. The rituals end, and with them comes renewal. For Musa, this pilgrimage cements both personal faith and Mali's position in the Islamic world. His presence in Mecca wasn't just a footnote. It was a declaration that Mali was not only wealthy, but devout, legitimate, and deeply connected to the greater Ummah. You catch yourself yawning softly, lulled by the imagined chant of pilgrims circling the Kaaba, steady as waves against a shore. In that rhythm, Musa finds peace, and so, maybe, do you. The holy cities fade into memory, and you find yourself once again on the road, this time heading westward. Musa's caravan turns homeward, but the return trip is anything but simple. Instead of traveling light, the emperor gathers more: books, scholars, artisans, architects, treasures not measured in gold, but in ideas and knowledge. The mainstream fact is this: Musa brought back to Mali not only prestige from his pilgrimage, but also people who would reshape his empire. One of the most famous was the architect al-Sahili, credited with introducing new design styles that would later define mosques and palaces in West Africa. It wasn't just wealth Musa carried. It was blueprints, calligraphy, and expertise. The quirky tidbit: some stories claim Musa returned with so many manuscripts that he had to hire extra scribes just to catalogue them. Imagine a medieval moving truck stuffed with scrolls, the scholarly version of returning from a trip with too many souvenirs. You'd need a very patient customs officer to wave that through. The journey through North Africa offered plenty of colour. Musa's caravan wound its way through cities like Cairo once more, Tunis, and possibly Fez. In every stop, gold flowed, scholars whispered about Mali, and Musa carefully selected companions for the empire he envisioned. Markets buzzed as his men traded salt and ivory for silks, ceramics, and glassware. Every mile added another thread to Mali's cultural tapestry. Historians still argue whether al-Sahili truly designed iconic buildings like the Jingareba Mosque, or whether his influence was more symbolic. Was he a master architect or simply a celebrated advisor whose ideas inspired local builders? The debate continues, but the broader truth is clear. Musa actively sought intellectual imports, not just material ones. You picture the caravan trudging once again through shifting sands, but this time the mood feels different. There's a sense of accomplishment, a glow of purpose. Yes, the camels are tired and the guards are dusty, but the emperor's gaze looks forward. He is bringing home not just proof of devotion, but tools for transformation. At night, the campfires crackle with new voices. Scholars debating philosophy, architects sketching in sand, poets reciting lines from distant lands. Musa listens, nods, and perhaps quietly dreams of Timbuktu rising into a true beacon of learning. The desert stars are witnesses once more, glittering above a caravan that now carries the weight of both gold and knowledge. When at last the caravan turns toward the Niger River Valley, you sense the anticipation of a homecoming. The empire waits, unaware of just how much its emperor has gathered. Not only treasures for the present, but seeds for the future. You've marched across dunes, prayed in holy cities, and trudged back with knowledge in your pack. Now, the real work begins. Musa returns to Mali, not merely as an emperor, but as a man transformed, and you walk with him through the bustling streets of Timbuktu as construction begins to boom. The empire hums with a new rhythm. Stone by stone, idea by idea, it reshapes itself under his watch. The mainstream fact is this: Musa oversaw the building of some of Mali's most enduring monuments. The Jingareba Mosque in Timbuktu, commissioned from the Andalusian architect al-Sahili, remains standing to this day, its earthen walls and timber beams weathering centuries of desert winds. Alongside it, schools and libraries flourished, establishing Timbuktu as a center of learning revered across Africa and the Islamic world. The quirky tidbit? Chronicles claim Musa once paid an Andalusian poet, not in gold, but in bricks, literal bricks, to help construct a building. Imagine being rewarded for your art, not with a purse of coins, but with construction materials. Congratulations, here's a pallet of mud bricks. Go wild. It's the kind of payment only a king rich in both imagination and resources would consider. Historians still argue whether Musa's patronage directly created Timbuktu's golden reputation, or whether the city was already rising before his reign. Did Musa simply supercharge what was happening naturally, or did his investments make the difference? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You stroll through the newly built mosques, cool shade beneath their high earthen walls offering relief from the Saharan sun. Scholars murmur verses of the Quran. Children scribble letters on wooden tablets. Scribes bend over manuscripts, copying texts in Arabic and Songhai. The air smells of parchment, lamp oil, and dust, the perfume of learning. Musa doesn't just build for beauty, he builds for legacy. He funds madrasas and endowments, ensuring that knowledge will outlive his gold. He transforms Mali's wealth into institutions, leaving behind something more lasting than coins scattered on a roadside. Timbuktu becomes less a city and more an idea, a beacon of scholarship at the edge of the Sahara. You wander farther, into the libraries Musa's vision inspired. Rows upon rows of manuscripts line shelves, covering theology, astronomy, medicine, poetry. Imagine walking into a medieval bookstore and finding not just one Quran, but hundreds of texts on mathematics and herbal remedies. For centuries, these manuscripts remained hidden in family chests, waiting to be rediscovered by modern historians. And in the midst of all this grandeur, Musa still walks humbly. You picture him inspecting a construction site, robes catching dust, pausing to chat with a mason about the angle of a wall. He prays at the mosques he commissions, blending kingly authority with simple faith. By the time the sun sets, Timbuktu glows with torchlight and quiet chants of evening prayer. The city is no longer just a stop on the trade routes. It is a monument in itself, one built by Musa's vision and ambition. You stand once again in Timbuktu's markets, but now you notice something different. The city doesn't just hum with local chatter, it resonates with the accents of distant places. Traders from Venice, scholars from Fez, pilgrims from Cairo, all converging on Mali, drawn by whispers of Musa's wealth. His gold may have glittered in Mecca and Cairo, but the ripples now spread much farther, reaching maps, legends, and imaginations around the world. The mainstream fact is this: Musa's wealth and pilgrimage secured Mali a place on the world stage. In the Catalan Atlas of 1375, he's famously depicted holding a golden orb and scepter, a visual shorthand for power and prosperity. For Europeans who had never seen Mali, Musa became the face of an entire continent's riches, perched prominently on their maps. The quirky tidbit: some sailors' tales exaggerated him into near myth. One account described Musa's court as so laden with gold that even the dogs wore golden collars. Imagine trying to pet a palace hound and nearly being blinded by the reflection. Was it true? Almost certainly not, but exaggerations like that show how Musa blurred the line between history and fairy tale. Historians still argue whether Musa's reputation accurately reflected Mali's sustained wealth, or whether it was a glittering snapshot of one ruler's extraordinary reign. Did Mali truly sustain such abundance for generations, or was Musa the singular comet that lit up the medieval imagination? The debate lingers, but either way, Mali was firmly written into the global story. You imagine Venetian merchants hearing of Musa and sketching coins with African motifs just to sell the idea of connection. In Granada, scholars might pass around rumors of an African king whose generosity knew no limits. In Cairo, elders would tell children about the day the markets broke under a rain of foreign gold. Stories travel faster than caravans, and Musa became both legend and brand ambassador without trying. Meanwhile, back home, the empire feels these ripples too. Scholars arrive in greater numbers, sensing opportunity. Manuscripts flow into Timbuktu, carried by caravans eager to trade with this suddenly world-famous land. Musa's wealth isn't just gold anymore. It's intellectual capital, curiosity, prestige. Mali is no longer just a waypoint for salt and ivory. It is a cultural powerhouse, recognized and sought out by distant civilizations. At night, as you drift in your imagination, the empire glows like an ember at the edge of the Sahara. Musa's name circulates in whispers across oceans, and maps forever fix him as the Golden King of Africa. You realize that wealth, once given away, can still multiply, not in coins, but in stories. The empire glitters, the scholars scribble, the merchants jingle their coins, but even gold cannot slow the march of time. You find yourself walking with Musa in his later years, when the weight of both crown and years presses heavier on his shoulders. His empire still shines, but the sun is dipping lower, and the edges of his reign show signs of strain. The mainstream fact is that Musa ruled for roughly 25 years, his reign ending around 1337. In that time, he expanded borders, built mosques, and filled Timbuktu with scholars. But no matter how wealthy, no king lives forever. Toward the end, the focus shifts from expansion to succession, from glory to ensuring stability. The quirky tidbit: some legends suggest Musa grew so cautious in his old age that he demanded reports not just on crops or markets, but on how many fish were caught daily in the Niger River. Picture an emperor surrounded by scrolls, nodding gravely as an aide announces, "Sire, 37 tilapia, 12 catfish, and one very confused crocodile." Whether true or not, it paints Musa as a ruler watching every detail, like a man reluctant to let go. Historians still argue whether Musa died peacefully in 1337 or lived a few years longer, passing around 1341. Medieval records are hazy, as if even his departure was cloaked in mystery. What they do agree on is that his chosen successor was his son, Magha. Yet whether Magha was ready, or whether the empire could sustain the momentum Musa built, remains part of the long debate. You drift through the streets of a twilight Timbuktu. Buildings still rise, scholars still lecture, markets still bustle, but a subtle unease runs beneath. People whisper of rivals eyeing Mali's riches, of desert tribes stirring at the borders, of whether Musa's heirs can hold together what he forged. The golden glow feels a little dimmer, not gone, but fragile. Musa himself remains devoted to faith. You picture him praying quietly in a mosque he commissioned, his voice softer now, but steady. He has walked deserts, broken economies, and left a city of learning where there was once sand. Yet at the end, he prays as he did at the beginning, a pilgrim in the vastness of time. The torches burn low, and in your imagination, the emperor fades into the dusk, a man whose shadow stretches across centuries, even as his mortal life winds down. The night grows quiet, and you stand in the still air of Mali after Musa has gone. His son Magha takes the throne, but the air feels different, lighter, less anchored, as though the empire itself knows its anchor has slipped. You watch the torches flicker in the royal court. The merchants shuffle uneasily, and the scholars keep writing, though their glances betray doubt. The mainstream fact is clear. Within a generation of Musa's death, Mali began to decline. Internal squabbles, succession disputes, and pressures from desert raiders chipped away at its once unshakable dominance. By the late 14th and early 15th centuries, the empire's borders shrank, and rivals like the Songhai rose. Musa had built a mountain of wealth, but mountains erode without careful tending. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some travelers' tales suggest Musa's descendants still tried to stage extravagant parades of gold, even when the coffers were running low. Imagine a royal procession where the camels wore glittering saddles borrowed from neighbors, or nobles whispered, "Don't jingle those bags too loudly, they're half filled with sand." Whether exaggerated or not, it highlights how difficult it was to maintain an image of endless abundance when reality frayed. Historians still argue whether Musa's wealth was truly as limitless as the legends suggest, or whether stories grew taller with every retelling. Was he the richest man who ever lived, or simply the richest anyone in the medieval world had seen? The debate lingers, like the dust that swirls across the Sahara, always shifting shape. Yet despite decline, the cultural legacy of Musa and his empire did not vanish. Timbuktu remained a symbol of learning for centuries, even if armies later burned its libraries. The very idea that in the 14th century, in the heart of Africa, a king could bend economies and spark intellectual renaissances that endured. His story traveled by camel, by parchment, by whispered tale, until it reached us, here, centuries later, as you listen in the dark. And so you imagine the last glow of Musa's empire as a candle. The flame flickers, it bends, it shrinks, but for a moment it fills the whole room with warmth. Even as it dims, the memory of that brightness lingers. The empire may have weakened, but Musa's name survives, carried like a lullaby across time. And now, the narration itself must soften, like that candle guttering low. The wind down begins. Your breathing slows. You picture the Sahara once more, not as a place of harsh struggle, but as an endless quilt of golden dunes, rippling gently under moonlight. No caravans trudge, no merchants haggle, no scholars argue, just sand and silence, stretching forever. You follow those dunes as they roll into the distance. The empire fades, the gold fades, the noise of markets, the chanting of scholars, the sound of coins falling into palm after palm, all soften into echoes you barely hear anymore. What remains is calm. You picture Musa himself, not as a king, but as a man at rest. His crown is set aside, his hands are folded, his breath is steady. Around him, the empire he built hums quietly, and even if cracks appear, tonight they do not matter. Tonight, only peace matters. The air grows cooler, the sky darker, the stars brighter. Each one glimmers like a grain of gold suspended in the night. And as your eyes grow heavier, you feel the story itself rocking you, like the slow sway of a camel through the desert, step by step, softer and softer, until you are no longer walking, but floating. Let the desert hold you. Let the silence stretch. Let your thoughts dissolve into the vastness, where time itself feels less sharp, more like a lull, a gentle fade, and in that hush, the life of Mansa Musa becomes not a tale of power or decline, but simply a bedtime story, one you've carried across dunes and centuries, all the way here into sleep. Good night.